All right, it's 9 o'clock, so um, let's get started. Cool. Okay, so welcome everybody to the technical contractor training. Um, all right, for Austin Energy. Okay, go. All right, so before we get started, just a couple of housekeeping notes. You guys should all have your mics muted. And then if you do have any questions, just type them up in the chat. We're not in person, so I'll skip that bullet. And then current project wait times. So for application LOI, it's about 3 to 4 weeks. DGPA reviews, 1 to 2 weeks. Final documentation review, so about 3 weeks. Inspections are 2 to 3. And then the shutdown wait times is still depending on location, about 3 to 4 months. For attendance tracker, I'm going to put the link in the poll, but or sorry, the poll in the chat. There we go here. Please fill that out with all the information, and that's how we are tracking attendance. All right. Next one. Okay. Upcoming meeting dates. So our administrative meeting is June 20th. General meeting, June 18th. Technical is August 15th. So those are the 3 that we have. And we do, for the participating contractors, require that at least 1 technical and 1 administrative meeting. So thank you all for being here. All right, so let's start off with a safety moment. So rain safety, driving in the rain. So when you are driving the rain, make sure that you're turning your headlights on. And if you skid, avoid hard brakes or turns. Prep your house for rain, inspect your roofs and the gutters, prune any trees so they don't fall on your house, and be prepared for the event of an emergency. So listen to the weather warnings, have an emergency supply of food and water and necessities, so flashlights, batteries, things like that. So you're prepared if anything goes wrong, making sure that you have what you need. Awesome. All right. Well, rain safety. Cool. All right. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and pass it off to Megan.
Thank you, Athena. Appreciate it. All right, let's go through inspection pass rates really quick. All right, thank you. So how are we doing so far? We got a 75 overall for Q2 FY24. Just as a reminder, that's January through March of this year for all final solar inspections. That is not just participating contractors, that's everybody. And that 75%, I think, is an increase from last time, but it's still just hovering right above that 70% sort of minimum threshold for the rebate program. So just wanted to call that out there. So far in Q3 for FY24, we're at 82%. So that's looking really good. Let's maintain that if we can and get those inspections passed. That said, a couple of things as a reminder of what kind of goes into these. So inspection attendance is really important. Obviously, when you need to be there for a final, you are required to be there. It is not required for roughs or meter checks. So you guys don't have to be there as long as we have access to the equipment. If we don't have access to the equipment, you do still need to be there for a rough or a meter check. No shows without notifications is a failed inspection. Please cancel at least 24 hours in advance. That'll help us keep you guys from failing that inspection. If it's less than 24 hours notice, it's more likely than not going to be a fail. If you're struggling to pass inspections, feel free to schedule pre-cons. Those are really helpful and allows you to meet with inspectors on site to discuss your project. You can also use the checklist provided in our interconnection guide, pages 76 to 79. And then, of course, attend these trainings and other contractor trainings. Alrighty, next slide, please. Okay, I can go ahead and read through this. Line side tap requirements. I think we've gone through this a couple of times, so I'm not going to spend too much time here, but feel free to add questions to the chat if you guys have any. But effective as of November 1st last year, we adopted NEC 2023. We are also enforcing NEC 230.46. So effective Jan 1, 2023, pressure connectors and devices for splices and taps installed on service conductors shall be marked suitable for use on the line side of the service equipment or equivalent. So please make sure you guys are adding these labels as intended. All projects with permit applications submitted August 1st and after must comply. If the connector does not contain the specified marking, inspectors will accept the spec sheet showing it is rated for this use. So please have that on site if and when appropriate. Alrighty, next slide, please. And with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Athena. Thanks, Athena.
Thank you, Megan. All right, so RCA schedule for commercial projects. Okay, so if you are putting in a project for commercial that is over 74K per year for the incentive, you will need to go through the request for council action. So the RCA is the next RCA deadline is May 21st. It's coming up here. So if you do have some projects, then we can head those out. And then it looks like Tim wants to jump on. So Tim, please take it away. Tim, are you able to unmute yourself?
Can you hear me now?
Yes, yeah.
Hey,
we got
okay. Sorry, I was trying to jump in earlier, but I just wanted to remind you all and really emphasize that if you have a commercial project, it is required that you request a 100 on-site pre-construction. And that way we can come out, look at the site, give you advance notice if there are any, issues that you need to address prior to construction. We'll look at your plans, we'll look at the site, we'll make sure, all of the existing site clearances are correct and the proper shutoffs and everything like that. So that way you don't end up at the final inspection having to do a lot of rework and potentially extensive rework. Another thing that we're noticing is that we're having issues with the meter variances, and there's likely going to be policy change happen around those meter variances. And we may be talking about this more in the meeting, but all of this stuff bears repeating. So make sure that if you are not planning to group your meters, you must request a meter variance. And you need to get approval to that meter variance prior to construction. So, it could be that you have a meter variance request in the queue. Feel free to follow up on that if needed. But again, please don't go ahead and just assume that you're going to get a meter variance and then install the project, because it's going to create issues in the back end. So those are my two announcements to help you guys improve the pass rates and just improve all the efficiencies for getting your projects passed. Thanks.
Awesome. Great points, Tim. Thank you so much. Okay, cool. So I'll flip through to RCA. Okay, yes. So May 21st is the next deadline. That'll mean that you will get to present to council on June 18th. Here's an kind of where we're at in terms of commercial for PBI and CBI. We're over halfway for CBI. So if you do have your projects, if you have any questions, just let us know. Send us email to solar@, and then we can take a look. Awesome. Okay, now let's move on to the interconnection process. Sorry, and then Stu, do you want to take it away?
Thanks, Dana. Yep, can you hear me?
We got you.
Good morning, everybody. Stuart here. All right, so some interconnection references for you. This is the Austin Energy. It's not the homepage, but it's close to the homepage. You can see there if you just do austinenergy.com, you just have the contractors tab, and there highlighted for you are some important documents that we use. One of which is the Austin Energy Design Criteria, our distribution interconnection guide, a blank DGPA form, distributed generation planning application, which you will need for all solar projects. And then there at the bottom too, you can search that for metering guidelines, and that will take you, I believe, to the meter sockets page where there is a list of like explicitly approved meter sockets, one of which you'll have to use for your project. Next slide. So some more interconnection references. Obviously, we go by the NEC. We are on the 2023 code cycle. Some important articles are 690, which we all know about that one. It's been in there for a while. 705 is how to interconnect your systems that you're installing. We don't have it written there, but 706 is for batteries and energy storage systems. So those three, I would say, are very pertinent for your PV systems. And of course, the rest of the code is also important if you're doing work on services. The Austin Energy Design Criteria Manual includes criteria for all of our different services. And I would say the section of most relevance in there would be section 1.9, which talks about all the criteria for installing meters properly. And actually 1.12 in there, we moved some things from the distribution guide into the design criteria. A lot of that is like, it's just lifted straight from the distribution guide. So look there for how to install your systems. And then there's the interconnection guide. There's going to be a lot of repeated information in there, but there will be more extensive stuff throughout the interconnection guide. Towards the end of the interconnection guide is that 2-page or 3-page list for contractors to help you guys pass your inspections. So if you take those 3 pages, print them out, and walk your job before an inspection, you will likely have a much higher percentage chance of passing. So we'd recommend that. There's also the City of Austin Electrical Ordinance, which you can find at that link there. That covers things like our color code, which instead of black-red, which we're used to, it's going to be red-black in our territory for residential services. Also license and local code requirements. Another one is the incentive program guidelines, which I think we have a link at the bottom of this presentation. And those are rules that go above and beyond the NEC and the design criteria that you'll need to meet in order to get incentives. And then, of course, we have the International Residential Code 2021 version. It's really just like 1 page. So R328, I think you have free access to that online. But it's a 1-page document that covers some basics about energy storage systems that we'll address in a little more detail in this presentation. All right, next. Day in the life of a solar project. So like I said, we're on the 2023 code cycle of the NEC, and then you have our 2 local documents and the IRC. The design for that is maybe a week, depends on how long you guys take. That would be in y'all's court while you design. If you're getting a rebate, just be sure you follow the rebate guidelines, and you need to submit a rebate application and have that approved before you start. So the Development Services Department, which is also just the City of Austin, you can follow that link there, and that will be the portal where you will get your permits approved and also submit your documents like your DGPA and your ESPA for doing services. And that could take 3 to 5 days unless you are applying for a quick turnaround, which I think you can basically Google that, and there's a new document that will it'll tell you basically if your project is eligible. There's not a whole lot of projects that are eligible for QT. So please submit your plans with your permit. We will look at those at inspection. And your permit balance needs to be paid off for that permit to be valid, which it will have to be valid and active before you request inspection. Shutdowns, that's the number right there, 505-7620. I think they actually recommend that you email them. So I would start with an email at St. Elmo's distribution@austinenergy.com. As Tim was mentioning, meter variances need to be applied for, and that's the place to send them right there via emails to abdur.rahman. There is a long wait time for certain areas of town, could be up to 3 months for service shutdowns, and up to 2 weeks for a meter variance. So apply as early as possible in your project, because again, like Tim was saying, it needs to be not installed before they give you that approval for the meter variance. Again, the interconnection guide, technical trainings like what we're doing right now, how long the project takes, that's up to you guys. This is important. If your name is on the permit, the work belongs to you. So whether or not someone else does that work and your hands weren't directly on it, it is still your work and we will treat it that way at inspection. So the fact that it wasn't you who physically did the work is not an excuse for poor workmanship. Inspections right now are about 2 to 3 weeks. And then so we inspect and we release the meter, and then there's another 5 to 10 business day window where the meter will be installed by the metering shop. So they'll roll a second truck out there within 5 to 10 days after we inspect. Contractor's licensed electrician must be present at final inspection. So yeah, please, residential wireman or up with a license and a truck with your TECL numbers on them is required. Next. So some key differences from us and other jurisdictions. A solar PV meter is required for all solar installs. So if you're installing solar, there will be a meter required, and there are no exceptions to that. And like I said, you can Google AE meter sockets, and I believe it'll be the first couple links that show up, and there's a list there of approved meter sockets. So you got to find one of those. If there's supply chain issues and you can't find it, at the bottom of that page, there's a little directive on how to get approved for a non-approved meter can if there are supply issues, but be aware of that. That's very critical. So there's no loads on the solar side of the PV meter. There are some exceptions to that, like the battery, for example. So if you've got a system design that requires the battery to be, like say, DC coupled, or for some other reason on the solar side of the PV meter, that would be acceptable. But you don't want to be running house loads through the PV meter. Our color code, as I said, is red, black, not black, red. That's in the first few pages of the design criteria. We do require a full-size neutral through the inverter and the aggregate panel, not 70%, as would be allowed by national code. You need to use a number 6 copper for your equipment grounding conductor from the point of interconnection to or through the PV disconnect. So basically on the ground, if your feet are on the ground, you can pull a number 6 EGC. And then beyond that point, when you go up to your array, you can transition to what the NEC would allow. Supply side taps, line side taps. So your panel's got to have a main breaker. If you're doing a supply side tap, your panel's got to have a main breaker regardless. And your disconnect will need to be fusible and rated a minimum of 60 amps. So even if you got a 20 amp system and you got to use fuse reducers and all that, because it's technically service equipment, it's got to be a 60 amp rated disconnect. You need 2 inches of clearance around all meter cans. You also need address numbers, so like stickers, black on white, 2 inches high. This can be on the solar meter can, main panel, or the AE meter. Actually, I mean, it would ideally go on the AE revenue meter, but sometimes those meters are small and it doesn't fit. So you could put them on the PV meter can because the new cans are larger. You'll also be required to have a surge protector for all solar installations. So if it's an older service and a surge protector was not required, it will be required at our solar inspection. Rebate program requirements. So you've got to meet a certain amount of lack of shade, which is a 75% total solar resource fraction is what we call it. You'll have to submit that to us within 10 business days of inspection. There's also a requirement for a minimum tilt of 5 degrees for all solar panels. So the array itself needs to be at a minimum of 5. And that's generally in line with manufacturer recommendations about having them on a tilt for like soiling and things like that. helps with the lifetime of the system and overall production. So what does a good line diagram look like? This is one example. There are lots of different ways to have a good line diagram. This is one of them. It's got all your components called out. It's got your number of modules. It's got some amp ratings of your inverters. It's got wire sizes. It's got conduit. It's got pretty much everything that you're going to see on site. Notice that the you go solar, disconnect, meter, interconnection. It's always going to be that way. So yeah, this has chock full of information. It's clear to read, and it's got all the information you need. So yeah, do something like this. Here's an example of a good wall. You've got your PV meter and your revenue meter, and they're grouped, and there's 2 inches around both of them. It is labeled per code. And yeah, the disconnect is grouped. And on this wall, everything is good to go. Qualified electrician should look closely at this service too prior to the installation, just to make sure that you're not missing anything and you don't install a system that has other issues with the existing service. Next. So some key examples here of necessary service repairs. Left to right is service conduit, so that's an underground service lateral, right? And on the, I find it most commonly on the east side where the earth tends to settle. So if something like that happens, you've got exposed service conductors right there, which will need to be repaired under a repair permit, because you'll be working on the, should that be an upgrade permit? I believe that's a repair permit because you're working on the line side of the revenue meter. So pay close attention at site assessments, because that's something that easily gets missed. That second picture, the working clearances in front of that service equipment there, you've got steps, which are less than 30 inches wide. So right, the rule is 30 inches wide or as wide as the equipment, 36 inches deep and 6.5 tall. So if you got a staircase, something's got to be done right there. In order to have those working clearances. That third picture, meter location, you can't see it that well, but you have a revenue meter underneath that porch, which is not acceptable to Austin Energy. So if you're selling a system and you see something like that, that is something that you have to handle before you can install the solar. You can see that solar was installed in there. So they installed the solar, interconnected, and then realized that they had to completely relocate the service. So it's better to spend the money in the right order and not do all that work before. And then that last picture, so there's 2 different problems with that if you look closely. One is that there's no main breaker. So you've got that's the revenue meter that we can see with the actual meter in it. And then it goes directly through that wall to a breaker panel inside the house. Austin Energy will require an exterior main disconnect before it goes and feeds the loads into the house. So that's one thing in that picture. The other thing is that that's a soft rag riser. So if you see a service that has a rag riser like that, it definitely needs to be replaced as part of your PV installation. Next. Okay, for supply side connections, this is in the interconnection guide, Appendix B. You got to have a main breaker in the panel if you're doing a supply side connection. You need a fuse disconnect, obviously, and it might be surprising to you that the PV meter is the first component after the tap, which will be on the load side terminals of that PV meter. Some common errors are that the disconnect is greater than 10 feet from the supply side tap. So it's got to be within 10 feet, or there's not enough room in the panel. I think our next slide will speak to that, or your disconnect on a supply side tap is not at least 60 amps. So that's not the fuses inside, that's the actual enclosure itself. It's got to be 60 amps. All right, next slide. Okay, so supply side connections again. You can see those 2 pictures on the top there are taken from a manufacturer explaining how to do a tap properly. You want to have a straight piece of conductor so that connection can be safe and lasting. We also have some good pictures on the left of supply side taps that were done properly. There's plenty of room in those panels. They are done on a straight piece of service conductor. Picture on the right, however, if you look closely on the right of that panel, you can see those piercing taps are done. There's just not enough room there. So 312.8 in the NEC. That's basically you need 75% of space, which is 75% of that space needs to be no more than 75% needs to be occupied, which is a hard number in the field to assess. But I've heard it said that basically, if you have to put the dead front on and it takes like actual pressure to close that dead front on one of those panels, you're probably breaking the rule. So that's a rule of thumb on that one. Next. So whenever possible, please refrain from installing the panels that exceed the roof plane, like these pictures here. It just creates more stress and uplift on the roof. If you feel strongly that you want to do it, you'll need to get an engineer to sign off on that. Next. So how to perform shade analysis. Again, you got to have, so the new number that we all use is the TSRF, total solar resource fraction. It's got to be more than 75% if you are applying for the rebate. Your analysis should include a map of where each measurement was taken on the roof. So you need an on-site analysis. You need pictures with shade measurements at each location. And again, you got to have that total average TSRF. So you need to list the tilts and the azimuths that match the project measurements in EECP, which is where all this documentation goes when you're applying for a rebate. So to avoid a warning, again, 75% or higher, and you need to provide that in a timely manner. So 10 days from after inspection, if we request it, you'll need to submit a shade report. All right, next. So a successful project requires collaboration between the design and the electrical team. Common errors, like we say, service upgrade requirements not met, repair work not caught at the site assessment, connections not torqued to proper specifications. So yeah, you should be very careful about torquing things properly, especially in meter cans too, because there's no access to those meters after the fact, and you should torque them with a properly calibrated torquing tool and mark them. So for rebated projects, if you don't have the shade requirements met, and of course, failure to comply with our local codes and ordinances. Questions about locations and locations of meter and points of attachment, you can go to that email bottom there. Yeah, AE electric spots at awesomenergy.com. Breaker sizing. So your main must be equal to or less than the meter socket's rating. So like, for example, if you've got a 200 amp service and you've got a 200 amp meter can, you're good. But if you do a supply side tap that includes energy storage and additional loads behind that tap, you may have all of a sudden increased your total combined service rating to above the rating of the meter can. So you got to be especially careful not to do that. And that is that's a requirement that's listed in the metering section of the design criteria. Also a no-no is a wireway, or a colloquially known as a gutter box, is ahead of the billing meter. So this is not allowed per our design criteria. So if you see, like, for example, a duplex where there is a gutter or wireway ahead of the revenue meter, not the solar meter, but the revenue or billing meter, then that's a service that will require work prior to a PV system being installed. So tap splicing and communication wires are not allowed in meter sockets. So you just got to have straight uninterrupted conductors going to all your terminals in any of our meter cans. When your work's going to alter the service, you need to contact distribution metering at this email address here, AE distribution metering at Austin Energy. And this will ensure that the PV meter installation will not be turned down later or when you encounter unusual service configurations. Next, do we have any questions?
All right, so I've been watching the chat and it looks like we did have one question. Estella, I don't know if you wanted to add your question to the chat or come off mute, but it looks like there was a pre-con question. Otherwise, I think we're good to go here.
Cool. Yeah, if we find some in the chat, you can just stop me and take them at any point. You gotta have a pre-construction meeting for commercial projects, if that was your question. Yes. And
All
that can
right,
be
so it looks
scheduled.
like,
Yeah.
oh, sorry, go ahead, Stu.
I was just saying the pre-construction meeting can be scheduled just like the other inspection requests through the solar inspection request form, which I believe is in all of our email signatures. So if you email us firstname.lastname@austinenergy.com, we can reply, and there's relevant links there.
Absolutely. So it looks like the question is, hello, we had a pre-con meeting on 5/9 and failed. The inspector wanted minor changes. We have new stamped plans with said corrections. Who do we send the new plans to? Do we need another pre-construction meeting? So I'll just go ahead and say you can add the plans to the permit. If needed, or if you guys discuss this with your inspector, you can also send them to the inspector or to the solar inspections at austinenergy.com inbox. You'll still need to make sure that they're added to the permit. However, if you want to get somebody to review them, that is doable, definitely. If you send them to that inbox, we'll check it out and get back to you. Do you need to schedule another pre-con meeting? Only if you would like more feedback. And it is recommended in a lot of cases if you think you still got questions, you're not sure if everything has been addressed, feel free to schedule a second one, and then that way you guys are set up for that final inspection. Alrighty, and I think that's it for now. So feel free to come back if you've got any more questions. That sounds like, so we can proceed even though it failed.
Yeah, I guess I will say,
Go ahead.
I will say this, Megan. This question might be a pre-construction that I failed last week, and which the relevant point there, I think there was 2 PV systems, 2 PV meters, 2 services under 1 permit. And so I just didn't know how to put the proper notes in the right place. So point is, you got 2 interconnections, you need 2 permits, you need 2 sets of plans. It's gotta be that way because it's confusing enough as it is. So anyway, we can keep going if you want. So permits, gotta have a permit. There are different types of permit. Auxiliary power is the type of permit that we use for all PV system installations. So you will definitely need one of those, at least one auxiliary power permit for your system. That's as easy as it gets. If you've got work to do on the service, then you might need other electrical permits, service or upgrade permits. You'll need a building permit if it's new construction or a ground mount or solar shingles, or it's commercial projects. All commercial projects will need a building permit. Upgrades is when you're working on the billing meter or the utility side of the meter. Repairs is work on the customer side of the billing meter. So you're installing a new main panel, but the existing revenue meter can stay. That would be work that can be done under a repair electrical permit. And it does not require an ESPA, which is for new services. If you are replacing that meter can, the revenue meter can, then you will need to submit an ESPA under that upgrade permit, in addition to the DGPA under the auxiliary power. And batteries and energy storage systems also can be installed with the auxiliary power permit. All right. So, like I said, all solar and ESS projects in our territory require an auxiliary power permit from the city of Austin. So you'll see that in the drop-down menu on the ABC portal. So even if you're outside of the city limits, if there's an Austin Energy meter, you got to have an auxiliary power permit because we will be out there to inspect. Permits from other jurisdictions do not suffice. You may have to pull one of those, but you'll also need an auxiliary power. So we'll not perform an inspection or set the PV meter without this permit. When you apply, please use the following language in your permit description field. Install new or additional, however much kilowatts your system is, and also specify if it's existing or new, residential or commercial only. If the project includes energy storage, use language above, but change solar system to certain kilowatt solar and certain kilowatt energy storage system. If you're using a supply side tap for interconnection, include this language: supply side tap for PV and or ESS with certain size kilowatt PV system. All right. So like we say, do not install unless you've got a permit. Solar and energy storage systems do not receive a formal electrical plan review for residential or commercial projects at this time. Work on electrical service requires a separate electrical permit, as we mentioned, that must be closed before requesting final solar inspection. So it's sort of intuitive that you wouldn't want to inspect a solar system and pass it when you know a main panel's about to be replaced or revenue meter. So you're going to have all of that service work unrelated to solar done and complete and passed before you request a solar inspection. You must pay a reinspection fee before requesting the reinspection. So that's pretty straightforward. Rebated projects. Some contractors may not pull the auxiliary power permit. The system must be contracted and permitted by the same participating contractor. Some common errors: permit not pulled before commencing electrical work, unpaid fees on permits, which will basically mean an inactive permit. Service permits still open when solar inspection is requested and your permit is expired. So gotta have an active permit if you want an inspection. Also a reminder, use the form stack link to schedule inspections for solar auxiliary electrical permits. Do not use the ABC portal to schedule these. Okie doke. So the DGPA, these are different size systems here and how to interact with our system based on what size system you're installing. So if it's less than 25 kW total, you do not, it does not require a review. You can submit with a permit application. If your system is between 25 and 500, this is including solar and storage. This will require review by Austin Energy Solar Team. So please use that email address there, dgpa-review@austinenergy.com, for approval prior to applying for permit, because you will want to include that approved DGPA on your permit. If it's greater than 50 kilowatts, also it will require a review by us, and please also attach the one-line drawings and your design for that review. If it's greater than 500 kilowatts or interconnected generator, also requires review by Austin Energy's DER integration team. So that's the email address there, AEDER feasibility@austinenergy.com. For hosting capacity analysis, you'll need to submit an approved DGPA with this permit application as well. Not that common is installing systems on the downtown network of any size. There are quite a few other rules regarding installing on the downtown network. So this will every time require a review by our engineering team, the DER integration team, same as above. To find out if you're on the downtown network, see Appendix A of the Distribution Interconnection Guide, and that will tell you. And lastly, if solar system and ESS size is at least 25 kW, that's an asterisk around. Yeah, so add up the kilowatts, not the kilowatt hours. That's what we're talking about. That's what we're concerned with. Kilowatts of both your solar and your battery. All right, I think I'll pass it off to CJ now.
All right, appreciate the pass off. Okay, howdy everyone. Meter variance, when to request prior to installation. There's a lot of people that think you can build and ask for forgiveness. Forgiveness is not being granted right now. Please, 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 as early as you can, ask for that meter variance. If you think it's going to be more than 20 feet away from the revenue meter, please ask for that variance. Abdur Rahman at austinenergy.com. Need your meter variance request form filled out, one-line drawing, proposed placard language describing an alternate location, and supporting documentations as to why the alternate location is needed. Upload those variance requests to the permit, and just be forewarned, variance requests are not always granted. A controlled outage, when to request. Prior to any installation, don't build it and try to get a controlled outage as a emergency or anything like that. You must also pull a separate electrical repair or upgrade permit, and you will request that through St. Elmo Distribution at austinenergy.com, 505-7620, choose option 4. You have to provide a permit number and scope of work, or you may not have this request granted. If registered for the CDP Contractor Disconnect Program, follow the instructions on this page and perform the disconnect yourself once you have the correct permissions. Add request to disconnect in permit description. Austin Energy Spotter will give permission by noting OK to disconnect on the permit. Don't just show up, cut, and pull the meter. Make sure you are still appropriately asking for permissions on that. Next slide, please. Okay, now, some think it's just a wise idea to ask for a meter variance every single project. Not every project really needs one. When do you need one? If there's a gate, some kind of barricade, barrier, you can't get to it, you can't see it anymore. And then in the design criteria manual, there is a 20-foot distance allowed from the revenue meter to the PV meter before a variance is required. Usually 20 feet really does help, but if you're going to go past that, remember, as early as possible, ask for that variance, please. Okay, next slide. So a current transformer, a CT type meter, these are usually for single phase 350 amps or larger, or 3-phase 225 amps or larger. These are different from a general regular bypass handled meter. This inspection request process is different. If an instrument rated CT meter will be used, contact DMO, Distribution Metering Group, to schedule a CT inspection and meter installation, but you must do this before requesting the final solar inspection. It's very tempting to say, I'm done with the work, I want a 305. We can't give you that if you do not have your dark green tag on that CT meter done already. And that is through complex metering. It also has to be cleared out in the ABC portal that we can see the inspections taking place. In previous years, being a commercial electrical inspector, I have had people try to peel off the dark green tag from one meter and put it on another. That does not work. It has to be the tag in place and cleared out in the system. So CT meters do have windings inside the transformer to transform current from large current to small current so the meter can read it. In this case, there's a multiplier on the customer's bill, and this generally only applies to commercial installations. Next slide, please. All right, meters must be accessible 24 hours a day. They also must be grouped within 20 feet of the revenue meter. There does have to be 3 feet of clearance in front of the meter for the voltages that we work with typically on the day-to-day, 2 inches around the meter, and the center of the meter must not be below 30 inches or higher than 72 inches above your finished grade or platform to the center of the meter can. Cut seals. If you find a cut seal and you didn't do it, immediately report it to AE Revenue Protection at austinenergy.com. If you do not report a seal and we show up for an inspection and you're there, we only have what we're faced to go off of. You're there, the seal's cut, and we're here to inspect this new system. Don't have much to work with there. At that point, we have to report that we found a cut seal and a minor investigation we performed, and it will either go to the contractor or the home or business owner, whichever one that meter is tied to. So common errors, meter is incorrectly wired. So with us not doing net metering, and we have 2 meters, we have the revenue meter and the PV meter. The revenue meter must be wired with the grid power on the line side, so everything can be read properly for billing purposes. On the PV meter, the PV, the solar, is the source circuit for that meter. And because we have the benefit of solar buyback program, it must be on the line side of the PV meter so that it can be read properly. Improper meter cans, not an approved type or a different utility. So I had one recently that they had an approved meter base from our meter base website, but looking a little closer into it, it was approved for 120 208 volt and 480. It was actually a commercial meter they were trying to use on a residential project, and I had to decline that they cannot use that meter for this residential project. And I showed them where on the website that the differences between the two were. They changed the meter base out, meter is now installed, project finished. So just make sure you look through that website before you buy that meter base that is the appropriate kind for that particular work you're doing. Meter is behind the lock gate at inspection. If we show up for inspection and no one's there and it's locked, or the meter shop shows up to put the meter in and it's locked, nobody can get in, that's all we can do. So having access is critical to be able to keep the process rolling. A temporary meter left instead of a permanent meter. We have to have the blank and seal when we complete and approve the inspection. At that point, the blank and seal should stay until the meter shop shows up to open it and put their meter in. If there is a meter already installed, they will go hands off of it and that's it. They will kick it back to us and we'll have to investigate and see what's going on, which will delay the process of getting the customer their meter and their PTO to use their solar system. Knocking out your own holes in a meter can. So in our criteria, it does state that we have to, when running conduits into the meter enclosure, run the conduit into the factory punched knockouts only. Do not cut any holes in the meter enclosure. If holes are cut in the meter enclosure, AE will consider it damaged and will not approve the installation. And then using plastic anchors. We need metal anchors, sleeve anchors, drop anchors, tap cons. Those are all really good, solid, hardy, robust materials to mount the meter enclosure to the wall, or any of the other enclosures to the wall for that matter. So just no plastic anchors. We want everything hardy, sound, and robust. Next slide, please. Okay, so a diagram of working clearances. So we always have full headroom above. We have to have 2 inches around each meter. And then we have to have 30 inches to the center minimum and a maximum of 72 inches. I did see one yesterday that was at about 76 inches to center. And basically, if you're about 5'6" to 6 feet tall, just no meters above our heads. I've always kind of looked at it that way, no meters above our heads. And then within 3 feet of a gas riser, gas meter, or gas regulator. Next slide, please. Okay, in our design criteria and our interconnection guide, in the meter, we cannot have a bond in the meter or the disconnect. So we need to have them isolated appropriately for testing purposes. You can use a Polaris or you can use a terminal bar as shown on the left there, but we want to verify, and for your technicians, verify that there's no bond being made inside the meter can. Next slide, please. Alrighty, pre-cons. Pre-cons are really helpful if you're just not quite sure what to do with things. We see the cloth rag risers, we see the small or incorrect meter bases, we see overgrowth, we see lots of obstructions all the time. So always, when in doubt, get your permit and schedule through AE Solar Inspections that pre-con meeting so we can come out, chit chat about it, and see what we can come up with. It's usually pretty helpful, and most of the time we have a pretty good pass rate by doing the pre-con early on than not. Next slide, please. All right. Roof common mistakes. Roof penetration is not properly flashed. When we penetrate through the roof, we have to have what's called a witch's hat or a boot that actually re-weatherizes and insulates the building envelope. Poor wire management. I saw one yesterday that looked like a bowl of spaghetti on the roof. The wires need to be up off the roof per NEC, 3/4 of an inch, just to where nothing is touching the rooftop. Use of material not outdoor or UV rated. Sometimes we see Carflex on rooftops or PVC, and PVC and Carflex do have a temperature limitation that on roofs in Texas, it does get hot enough that it can start to melt. So we do need to actually make sure we're using appropriate conduits rated for the weather, for the beating sun, for being on rooftops. Unfastened modules, junction boxes, or conduit. Nobody wants those things to go flying through the air. There was a project that had a few of those go flying through the air, and that's pretty crazy because they're 3 feet wide, 4 feet long. That's a large thing that flying through the air. So verify all your modules are fastened down, appropriate junction boxes, and appropriate conduit on rooftops. Not all fittings made wrench tight. They need to have actual tools placed to fittings. There should be teeth marks on fittings from channel locks actually making them wrench tight. We don't want this stuff coming undone from the vibration of voltage flowing through the system over time. All metal not bonded back to the service. So all the metal must be created as one bonded system in some form or fashion. If you're not using appropriate grounding lock rings, then a grounding bushing would be required to make sure everything is bonded back to the source. All right, next, please. Oh, questions. All right. All right, I think we can go on to next. Okay, commonly required signage, rapid shutdown switch for solar PV system, photovoltaic system DC. This part does need to actually be filled out. Your operating voltage, those solar modules, they add up. They can become very high voltage very fast on these dwelling units. And then also operating current. There should be an operating current filled out in that blank too. Energy storage system disconnect. We do need the actual system voltage written on that. Rapid shutdown. Everything is, for the most part nowadays, equipped with rapid shutdown, but for first responders coming out in the middle of the night potentially, they need to be able to flash their flashlight around and see red stickers, rapid shutdown. They're trained to know what it is, but trying to find it in the dark when they're running around the house, just trying to find anything to shut off, they need to be able to see those stickers bright and easily. Aggregate panel. Do not remove, add, or relocate circuits from this panel. The aggregate panel is not a bonus sub-panel for the house for the extra circuits to be added to. It means what it means. Everything is designed to only withstand what we're doing with it on the solar and the ESS. No additional loads need to be added to that. No car chargers, no landscape lighting, no any extras. Inverter output connection. Do not relocate this overcurrent device. If it is for the backfeed breaker at the bottom of the panel, it needs to stay per NEC code at the bottom of the panel as far from the main as possible. This enclosure contains feed-through conductors that may be energized when this disconnect is de-energized. And ESS, energy storage systems, are one of the times where you can turn a disconnect off and both sides of it are still energized. And if people are not aware of that, they can think, okay, cool, I shut the disconnect off, we're fine. I shut the breaker off, we're fine. And if they don't take a moment to test that voltage, they're going to be in for a very rude awakening when they realize both sides of it are still energized. And that leads us to terminals on line and load may be energized in the open position, meaning the off position. It can still be on because when you turn that off, the batteries kick in. And then energy storage system on site, ESS disconnect and main breaker. In main service panel must be off for whole home electric shutoff. Next slide. All right, ESS and panel location. So let's see. The plaque that we need, if everything is not in the same location, has to denote where the service is and where the ESS location is. So if there's ESS on one side of the house completely, or even around the corner, for the first responders' sake, we need to have it to where they can see, okay, there's the rapid shutdown sticker, there's the ESS placard, all right, there's other sources of energy on this site. If they're trying to turn electricity off because of an electrical fire and there's 4 different sources of electricity, they need to know that because they're going to turn one off. Okay, cool. It's still burning. They're going to turn another off. It's still burning. It won't shut off. That's what the placard helps them with, is finding all the locations where all the shutoffs are at. And the placard does need to be rated for the weather. It does need to be UV resistant. I did see a sticker yesterday that's probably only been on there for a month, but it's already peeling itself and it's bubbling itself up. So that one does not meet the design criteria for placards for ESS location. All right, next slide. All right, per the 2021 residential code, garages must be finished, separated from a dwelling unit, and it cannot be a habitable area. A garage has to be a garage. If they turn it into a rec room or a man cave, that is now a habitable area. ESS really cannot be located in that. It's no longer a garage anymore. Attached garages containing ESS must have a listed heat alarm or heat detector interconnected with smoke alarms in the dwelling unit. And if it is in the straightforward drive path, not on the sides of the garage, the straightforward drive path, meaning they can easily pull in and not be paying a smidgen of attention and hit the batteries. We need approved barriers, some kind of bollards, some kind of gate, some kind of protective measure that that vehicle cannot hit those batteries. Next slide, please. All right, ESS guidance. The ESS must be 9540 listed. That isn't actually a listed battery system. May not be installed anywhere in a dwelling unit, habitable area. So the garage or outside are the best prime locations for that. If you're trying to install it inside of an attic or inside of some kind of an unfinished room in a house, it's in the dwelling unit. It really should not go there. If installing batteries in Austin Fire Department territory, send plans to afdhazmat@austintexas.gov for review when individual ESS unit is greater than 20 kilowatt hours or when the total is over 80 kilowatt hours for a commercial installation, let's say. Don't submit the plans to AFD otherwise, though. And if you're not sure what jurisdiction you're in, if you're in the ETJ or if you may or may not be within Austin Energy territory, we do have a map at that link right there that will tell you where Austin territory ends, but ETJ continues with Austin Energy territory until it gets into other utilities. Encore, Bluebonnet, PEC are the ones that are most local around us. ESS project must have plans reviewed and endorsed by a Texas licensed professional engineer and be attached to the auxiliary permit and presented at final inspection. We do need the drawings on site. It can be digital, it can be in paper form, either one. We just want to make sure that what was approved by the PE was what was installed, which is what the customer is getting. Plan sets will be uploaded to the auxiliary power permit and will be reviewed at time of inspection for endorsement. Inspection will be failed if the endorsement is not present or does not appear authentic. If it's blurred, if it's not real, if it's someone just signed off on it, it has to be an actual PE for energy storage system projects. And then for ESS, because we do get different manufacturers, there's all kinds of different installation methods for what you're trying to do. There's always new technology coming out too. Always, always, always review the manufacturer's instructions before installing. They could tell you conductor sizing, clearances, locations. They won't tell you anything about how we install per our interconnect guide, but they will tell you for that particular piece of equipment, all that they have about that. Next slide, please. All right, how to request an inspection. Don't call me asking for an inspection. Go to austinenergy.com, go solar inspections. Inspection form is embedded on this page. Fill out all required fields. Additional fields may appear depending on your selections and the type of inspection. So we do have rough inspections, we have pre-con, and we have final. So we have a few different varieties of things that we work with. Once submitted, solar team will receive data and send, oh, it went away, and receive the data and send inspection notifications via Smartsheet. Battery located on the solar side of P meter, yes, if solar feeds ESS before being metered. If the solar charges the batteries before it gets metered, then yes would be the answer to that one. Request an inspection through ABC portal if Austin Energy is not the service provider. Next. All right, requesting inspections, indicate yes on the solar inspection request form here. Yes, battery is located on the solar side of PV meter, or no if not appropriate. Metering. It is possible you will need 2 AE meters for solar installations with batteries behind the PV meter, and your team will want to indicate this on the initial permit request. If as-built design is different from initial permit plan set, please add total system size during final inspection request. With multiple meters and batteries online, customer billing can become confusing. Bottom line, AE customers are billed for 100% of their consumption and credited for 100% of their solar production, even with battery storage. This is why at final inspection, we are testing full functionality to make sure that the billing in the end is as accurate as possible. Next slide. All right, we are coming soon. We're going to get a new ABC portal user interface. All right. New portal will have same information as the old portal, however, it has a new look and feel to it. Always trying to streamline our processes. Please continue to use the existing online inspection scheduling form until we announce that the ABC portal changes are ready to accommodate Austin Energy inspections into the auxiliary permits. When the new portal launches, it may not be able to accommodate auxiliary permit requests. It may be a feature added later this year. Next. All right, pre-installation inspections, roughs and pre-cons. So rough. If conduit will not be accessible at the time of final inspection, if it is buried in a trench or hidden in a wall or a ceiling and we cannot see it, a rough is recommended to call. We're not told yes or no to accepting photos, but if the photos provided don't show us enough or we feel something's off about it, like the photos don't look like the place we're looking at right now, or they don't look like the right project or job, we can decline not accepting the photos and request that that get opened up for inspection. So don't just jump on, we're going to cover it up and ask for forgiveness. We do have the ability to ask that be reopened for inspection purposes. Pre-con, on-site consultation with Austin Energy Inspector on design and interconnection requirements. So with auxiliary permits, and Megan, I think auxiliary permits have the pre-con for residential, but commercial, because they get a building permit generated automatically, the pre-con goes on the commercial.
I'll just say for A, B, and C, that's correct. But if you need a pre-con for a solar aux permit, just use the solar inspection request form, and you won't have any issues getting it scheduled. And it is required for commercial. I just wanted to clarify that. I don't think I made that clear enough earlier. Required every single time for every single commercial project and for any residential project that you just want feedback on. So yeah.
Right, but don't schedule that on the building permit because you'll get a building inspector to go out that says, yep, looks cool, build it, bye. And they are not going to give you what you're looking for with one of us, Stuart, Chalin, or myself coming out to give you a full pre-con and discuss the ins and outs of what you're going to be working on. So definitely solar inbox, AE solar inspections at austinenergy.com. So this is required for all commercial projects or if interconnecting on utility side of billing meter. And for commercial, it's required and super highly recommended because commercial gets extremely complicated extremely fast. Before requesting, please have an active permit, an auxiliary power permit, and have your approved engineered finished drawings of what you're going to install. Not a as-built design, not an incomplete design. We need the full, complete, stamped design, please. And then use the solar inspection request form. Next. All right, pre-wire for solar required when solar-ready conduit is installed and will be covered up, but the scope work does not include a full solar installation. There are subdivisions coming in that are doing solar pre-wire, and some are finishing and some are not. So a pre-wire is they're just adding the wire. It may not do something for a little while. It may do something in the near future. Austin Energy elects all pre-wire installations in its territory, whether residential or commercial, inside or out the city limits. Please fill out the DGPA, select only pre-wire for solar in section C, and do not enter any capacity information as you may not know it yet. Obtain the auxiliary permit with pre-wire for solar in the description of work. In the solar inspection request form, select pre-wire for solar as inspection request type. And it's basically a type of rough inspection. We're just going in while the walls are still open. Please have the walls still open and ceiling open. And then we can just look for the conduits or wires or cables that are being ran for this. Inspection pass result will serve as a reference for any future solar projects on that site once somebody comes in to do the final build out of the actual PV system. All right, next. Inspection notifications with Smartsheet. So Smartsheet does not work totally with ABC in tandem. You and your customer will receive emails when inspection is requested, postponed, scheduled, passed, failed, and when PV meter is installed with PTO. If the inspection fails, deficiencies will be reported in the confirmation email. The sender will be Austin Energy Solar Inspections or the inspector name via Smartsheets. Add automation at app.smartsheet.com as safe sender to ensure messages do not go to spam. Check with your IT team to ensure Smartsheet domain is on your email allow list. Email the solar inspections with any inspection related questions. Or if you have your inspector for the project's email or phone number, you can always get a hold of one of us if you have something specific for the project. If multiple inspections are scheduled completed for the same contractor at the same time, Smartsheet combines the notifications for all inspections into one email. Next. All right, inspection notifications with Smartsheet. Your pre-construction meeting was requested. That is what that looks like, what you will see. And then when you schedule for a rough or a final inspection, it'll give you a prompt of your Austin Energy final is scheduled. We do work off of time slots. So you get a date and you get a time. And that is the time that we will do our best to make it there. We're usually really good at being on time, day of, to the hour, sometimes earlier. And as far as a lot of y'all probably know, Chalin likes to be quite early sometimes. I'm right behind him on that, though. I can't say nothing. All right, next slide. All right, how to be a rock star at an inspection. Send the correct person, a master, a journeyman, or a residential wireman. But the best bet is actually somebody that actually knows about the solar PV system installed. A lot of times somebody will send a master, journeyman, or wireman that's never seen the project, never seen anything to do with it. Some people say they know how to do solar and they have no idea how to even turn it on. So make sure you send the correct person with the right licensing and then potentially the right competency to that. Be prepared. Bring your wiring diagram, your one line, your set of drawings, any kind of photos. If you have attic photos, if you have roof photos, if you have junction box photos, bring any photos you want for the inspection for that site. Have your TDLR documentation. If we ask you for a license, be ready to pull your license out. Have your TECL number on your vehicle with your contractor name actually permanently attached to your vehicle. And then if you need, have your tools to make any corrections. Next slide. And preparing for an inspection, refer to the Distribution Interconnection Guide, Section C. Talk with your solar inspector. And before the final, test your system. Turn it on, commission it, test it, make sure it actually works. When we show up and we test for full functionality, that's part of it. It has to work. The customer is paying for this much. That's what they should get. The one line says that this is what they're getting. That's what the customer is paying for. That's what they should get. And it should all work when we get there. Use the Contractor Quick Reference Guide to check that all your installation meets all requirements. See the Interconnection Guide, Appendix C. Rebated project receives solar rebate confirmation letter. plus closed installation setup in EECP. Calling inspection without being ready is a violation of city ordinance. And it actually is. There should, I think in the city ordinance, it does talk about a supervisor shall walk the project before calling for an inspection or requesting a building inspector to make, or building official to make inspection. So yes. All right, common errors, non-performing systems. They just don't work. That's not good. That will get you a fail very quickly. Poor cable management. So up on the roof, all the wires not being lifted up off the roof. Missing placards, labels, stickers. If you're missing all the red, yellow stickers, your red placard, if you have ESS, that is something that needs to be addressed immediately. Installed system does not match design or drawing. It will ask you to have the drawing redrawn for what was installed or install what was approved by the engineer on the drawings. Wire sizing, there are times we see too small of wires. We do have the interconnection guide, the DIG, that does tell us what size wires minimum, and same thing with the design criteria manual, what size wires minimum through any meter enclosure, what size grounding and conductor through any enclosure. Loose wire connections or wires not being fully terminated in their terminal, so wire threads fraying out everywhere. Meter service clearances not met, so we talked about that earlier. Next to a gas regulator, too high, too low, something obstructing the clearance. Other things that can obstruct clearance are plants. I've been to one where they had 3 very large mountain laurels a foot in front of the service. I couldn't even get in there to open up the panel, and I had to put on there that I could not do the inspection because of trees in front of the service, and I had to ask that those be removed. How they were to be removed was up to the homeowner, but they had to be removed. Meter guidelines not met, whether it be for wiring, the meter base being the incorrect type, and then variance is not requested. Building it and asking for forgiveness later, not working very well right now, not recommended. Next slide, please. Any questions? And do I have one more, or is that Sam, you're up? Nope, I think that's
Sam's up
Sam.
after
I
this.
think Sam's up. All right.
But
Cool.
real
Take it
quick,
away,
I know
Sam.
there was a question around, really quick, guys, sorry, because we did have one question. I wanted to just make sure we address it really quick. There was a question around scheduling after hours outages. Just know that we're going to go through that here in the next couple of slides. So you'll get that exact detail here in just a sec.
Yeah, this last part towards the end, hopefully you can hear me. I have a new microphone. But it has all the helpful links here. We highly recommend, printing it out, or your admin keeping it at your desk. The slides, if you go a little bit further, they're really easy to copy and paste into an Excel sheet. You can put them in an Excel sheet and just keep adding on to it every time you have a new resource. If you find a good, helpful resource, please come back to us, let us know. We reach out to, I want to say, most of these contacts every week or two. But if you find a more helpful phone number or email address, please let us know, so we can let others know as well. And yeah, all good stuff here. I think it goes on for like another couple slides. Yeah.
All right, everyone. Oh, sorry, Megan.
Good, no worries, Athena. I was just going to address the last question. Is there a link for the contractor quick reference guide? I think maybe you're referring to the DIG, and we definitely have those links. So I can put those in the chat as well, but I think they're in this presentation too. You can also look up Austin Energy Distributed Interconnection Guide, and you should be able to find it if you Google that term. But let me grab that link for you.
Awesome. Okay, yeah, we'll drop it in the chat and then we'll add it to our spreadsheet. Cool. Okay, so if you haven't already, please fill out the form in the chat to record your attendance. We're trying to go away from adding it in the chat. That way we can make sure we get the questions filled out. So yeah, if you haven't already, please go to that form and add your information there. And then a couple of times I saw that maybe people were asking about slides. We will send you all the slides, so you will be having access to the links within this presentation. We'll send them out in an email shortly after this. All right, well, if you have any last minute questions, you can type them in the chat. And if not, have a great day. Thank you all so much.
Actually, while you guys are here, quick show of hands if you guys were at RE Plus this week. I'll just let you know that a couple of our teammates were. So if you guys are waiting on us for emails requests, just please expect a small delay, but we're back in office, back at it. So just know we're getting to it. But yeah, apologies for the delays, but you guys should get responses back today and tomorrow, and in the coming weeks. Awesome. Thank you guys.
Cool. Thanks, everyone. And yeah, we'll talk to you all later. Thank you so much.
Thanks, everybody. Have a good day.
Thanks for coming.
All right, looks like we've still got some questions coming in, so I'll try and address those as they do. For a battery system, do we have to pull an additional permit apart from the aux permit? Yes, you will need either a repair or upgrade depending on the scope of that electrical permit. And you also need to write in the description of the permit that it's an ESS for an ESS installation. I actually have steps and to-dos on that, so let me copy paste that over, but hopefully that addresses your question.
Awesome. Well, if anyone has any other questions, we can stay on for up until we do have the meeting until 10:30. And if you don't have any questions, then feel free to hop off. And yeah, thanks.